California Transportation at the post-COVID crossroads with Secretary of the California Transportation Agency, Tokes Omishakin. He'll talk with San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo.
First, Secretary, I wanted to ask a little bit about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which we are thrilled to see. It's rapidly investing a lot of funding throughout our country in infrastructure. And really, I think a lot of folks are wondering what we're doing here in the state of California to ensure both that we get our share and that these dollars are invested well to achieve goals like goals of equity here in our local communities.
First of all, a very good morning to everyone listening, and a good day to everybody listening, and to you, Mayor Liccardo. Thank you as well for your great leadership, not only in the city and the region there in the Bay Area in San Jose, but across the state as well. The support you've provided to the Newsom administration. So thank you very much for your leadership. But to your question about this, what everyone is calling a once in a lifetime infrastructure bill. It's truly remarkable. This is the biggest investment and the most forward-looking investment that we've had in transportation probably since President Eisenhower launched us down the path of building highways in the 1950s. And it's not only remarkable because it's $1.2 trillion for infrastructure and nearly 600 billion for transportation. But the fact that it's taken up an aperture that's unique for transportation and saying, let's look at equity related issues. Let's look at how transportation truly impacts, how it impacts the climate around us, the environment around us, and looks at how transportation, how we need to improve safety in transportation as well, and overall mobility is something truly remarkable. So kudos to President Biden and his team, the Vice President, for sending us in this path. We're projected to get roughly 40 billion over the next 5 years. We're probably stronger than any other state as far as being able to compete for the discretionary components of this money as well. Nearly $100 billion in discretionary money we can potentially get as well, on top of the 40 billion that we're automatically going to get, the formula money. And the reason why is because even before the Biden administration came into office, we as a state, including local governments listening, partners listening, we were already leaders. We were already leading the country on issues around climate, on issues around diversifying mobility, on issues around equity. So we're going to fare well beyond the formula money. We're going to fare very well in getting the discretionary money into the state as well, and continue to be the leaders that we've been.
Well, thanks, Mr. Secretary. You know, we were so fortunate to be able to lure you from Tennessee to California. And I think when you knew coming into this job, you'd have a lot of challenges in a state grappling with issues of traffic. But I suspect one challenge you didn't anticipate is this enormous experiment we're now undergoing on the viability of remote work. And it turns out an awful lot of folks are learning that they don't need to be in the office all the time, all 5 days a week, sometimes none of the 5 days a week. And some amount of remote work is really here to stay. What do you think that really means for the future of public transit? And are we still bullish on public transit in the state of California?
Undoubtedly so. We're definitely still bullish on public transit as a form of improving mobility and providing choices for people to commute in our state. But, to your earlier remark, if somebody had said to me in 2019 when I moved to California, look, there's going to be this once in a generation pandemic as well that you've got to deal with and manage the Department of Transportation. I would have been thinking twice or three times about the decision a little bit longer, but it's been a great experience nonetheless. These challenges grow us. If we can make it through it, we get a chance to expand. And we, the folks that are in public service, like you, Mayor, we're going to look back on this time in a decade or more and say, man, I'm glad I had the opportunity to be in service in one of the most challenging periods of an era of a century. You could argue. But to your question about whether or not we stay on track and we're still bullish on transit, yeah, definitely so. It has to be a part of the equation, because as much as we're focused on ZEV investment as a state, and we're leading, not only nationally, but in some cases, I spoke to a group in London virtually this morning. We're leading globally as well when it comes to ZEV. In the best case scenarios that you put together for us being able to tackle the climate change challenge we have, best case scenario, ZEVs will not get us there. ZEVs will not help us get to those ultimate outcomes, those huge reductions that we want to see in GHG. It's going to take a diverse multimodal system. And look, we took a big hit. Everybody knows VTA there in your city, Caltrain. Everybody took a big hit as it relates to ridership, despite the fact that we've averaged 1.4 billion riders a year. I mean, those numbers went significantly down into just a few hundreds of millions. But it has to be a part of the equation, not only for those climate challenges, but the equity solutions that we want to have. General mobility solutions, it's going to be there. And so we're going to continue that investment. The governor is proposing in his budget this cycle, again, more investment for transit and more investment for walking and biking opportunities in our state as well.
Well, then we'll keep plowing ahead with those important transit investments. Here in Santa Clara County, we were proud to be the first county in the country to rely on self-help. To tax ourselves, that is, to make important transportation investments. And of course, in the state of California, that requires a support of a supermajority, 2/3 of our residents who are voting. And so we have very important projects like BART to San Jose and Santa Clara, which voters have approved tax increases on 4 separate occasions, Caltrain electrification on 2 separate occasions. And these major projects, and I know it's true in LA and other cities throughout the state, are now encountering pandemic-era cost escalations, rapid construction cost escalations. How can the state help? I know you're getting this question from many mayors, including me, and undoubtedly there's always more demand for money than there is money. But is there a role for the state to play here to address these pandemic-era construction cost challenges?
That's a good point, Mayor. Initially when the pandemic first hit, we actually saw prices going in the opposite direction. We saw prices going down in infrastructure cost. We were seeing bids come in from contractors at a lower level. But with inflation that we're experiencing post the pandemic now, or we can say post the pandemic, those numbers are actually going in the wrong direction, if you will, the opposite direction. Now the prices have spiked, and so we recognize the hit that cities are facing, not only with that inflation, but the reduction in revenue as well from transit agencies. So there's a role for us as a state, but not only through avenues like the governor's budget. Again, he's undoubtedly bullish on transportation and clean transportation, which transit is one of those, clearly one of those. So that's one avenue that we could potentially provide some support to the local governments. But again, the federal angle as well, the IDGA bill, trying to see how we can make sure that we leverage some additional federal funds to support those projects that may be facing those cost escalations is something we need to keep in mind. So there's a role for us as a state and potentially a role at the federal government and of course, the local level as well.
Mr. Secretary, you can be assured that we are doing all we can to harass the federal government as much as we can. So we will not be only bugging you, but thank you. Appreciate that.
I have heard your name in the halls up there.
Yeah, we'll keep bugging them. Among other major projects, there's one we're particularly proud of here in San Jose, and that's around Diridon Station and of course, our Grand Central Station in the west that we're building here in our downtown. And I know that you're very focused on transportation investments that do more than simply provide transportation to achieve our broader goals around equity, supporting affordable housing, climate sustainability. We have this opportunity, and I'll just give this as an example, of course, here in downtown to be able to provide a convergence for 6 separate transit systems surrounded by immediate environs, a 7 million square foot campus of Google with 4,000 homes, 1,000 of them are going to be rent restricted and affordable, and a whole lot of other housing as well. As we think about projects like this, how is it that we and you think about aligning state transportation investments to achieve those broader goals?
Yeah, Mayor, the Diridon Station is probably one of those sort of unique prototypes that, hopefully can be replicated, especially in urban settings across the state, even more in the coming years. It is probably going to be, it's probably in the future going to be one of the most important transit hubs in the state, for sure, in Northern California. I mean, the confluence of things you just laid out of, all those, from Amtrak to, Greyhound to Caltrain, VTA, everybody sort of having this one particular location where they converge is just truly remarkable. But, examples like this where it's not only a business center, but potentially a housing center as well, that helps achieve equity goals. From what I understand, one of the things you all are doing is a part of the development, trying to ensure a significant percentage, maybe 25% is what I heard, of the residential development has affordable housing as well. I mean, those are the kinds of things that clearly helps us achieve the GHG reductions we want to see, because that means their transportation means are right there. I mean, it's right there for them. They can get to work and they get to home or places of play within a pretty short distance. So we'll continue to be supportive, very supportive. I know that the BART extension is one of the things that you guys are working on. We'll continue to be supportive of transformative projects like this Google campus that's near the Diridon Station as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I know that from the time that you were in leadership roles, even in Tennessee, you've always been known as a champion of active transportation. In fact, I think if you go on YouTube, I think there's a pretty funny interview. They've got you behind the wheel, hitching a ride with one advocate of active transportation. I think it's fun to see. In any event, one of the bright spots we're seeing out of this pandemic is we hope some of this biking, walking that people are doing is going to continue. And e-bikes are certainly seeing a surge in popularity as well in many cities. And we're planning transit-oriented development with a very specific set of sort of framework about what transit-oriented development is in terms of geographic proximity to whatever the transit is. Do you think that e-bikes and traditional bikes and micromobility and all the scooters are going to help us expand the geography of what transit-oriented really means? Is that going to really help a lot more folks get to transit?
I think so. I definitely think so. Look, we've again gone through a bit of a decline in the usage of micromobility and some means of micromobility during the pandemic, but we saw an uptick actually for people wanting access to walking and biking opportunities, because when transit, we couldn't get into these buses and tubes anymore. People were still looking for options, and they said, look, where's the biking infrastructure? Where's the walking infrastructure? And there are places like where you are in the Bay that were really aggressive about, trying to come up with some pilot efforts to get more immediate solutions on the ground for walking and biking. But the tie-in to TOD, I think, is very important. I think it's very critical. And when we think about one of the biggest challenges we face as a state as well, is clearly residential, the lack of residential units, housing in the state. I think the more that we can come up with affordable TOD solutions, it also helps impact the housing crisis that we have. Because it essentially means that we're building near transportation access. I mean, that's what TOD is. You're building more dense development near where transportation access already exists, specifically transit access exists. So the more we can do that, it reduces the dependence on having to pay for transportation, if you will, pay for fuel in the car or have to buy a car. You have that access more immediately by being able to get on transit near where you live. So it's not only a mobility solution that TOD presents. TOD presents a housing and climate solution as well. So and the tie-in to walking and biking facilities is clearly there. And walking and biking will, as we build that infrastructure, will help boost and support TOD development, undoubtedly.
Mr. Secretary, I know that one of the more controversial topics when it comes to transportation policy is around tolling on freeways. And I know I hear it because every time I vote for it, we end up getting a fair amount of pushback from members of the community who are understandably concerned, particularly about equity issues. And in our own Metropolitan Transportation Commission, we're pushing ahead with congestion pricing, charging tolls on freeway lanes as a way to fight congestion and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and use some of those resources for infrastructure and transit. And I guess the question is this the direction the state is pushing under your leadership? And given what we know, I mean, there are real concerns about commuters paying those fees and the equity implications of those charges. How do we tackle that challenge, and how do we center equity in the conversation?
Well, Mayor, that's another very important question. I mean, there are states that have been on the East Coast that have been more aggressive about investing in this area, or investing in transportation with this approach, by pricing the system, if you will. And local governments have taken a lead more in California. The state has been a little absent in this area, but we recognize the role that we play here, and that it should be stronger. And it has to be a part of the equation. As we think about ZEV, and the climate challenges, and we think about multi-modal solutions, another very key component of the transportation future for our state has to be congestion pricing and managing the system, congestion management, managing the system in that way. So yeah, it's a part of the solution. When it comes to equity specifically, I think there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, as we move towards pricing the system more, it also means more viable access for transit. So, if we're saying this particular lane is a hot lane, if you will, a high occupancy toll lane, that we're trying to get more people in this one dedicated lane, that also means transit, buses, BRT or whatever it may be, they will be able to use those lanes as well. So, and we know transit often is a more equitable mobility solution. So that provides an uplift from an equity standpoint, because transit will have access there. But also we need to think about subsidizing low income to middle income users of the system as well, to make sure that as we price the system, they can still have access, that we're not boxing out people who don't have the means to be able to have access to opportunity to work. So multiple fronts there. Transit will be a big benefactor as we move towards pricing, but we also need to think about how to make sure we we incentivize or subsidize low-income riders or transportation users as well to be able to use the system.
Well, Secretary Omishakin, I am so grateful that you've taken your very scarce time to spend with us to talk about these issues, share your insights. We are so fortunate to have you leading the charge here in the state of California, and we look forward to working with you to accomplish so many of these very important goals here in Silicon Valley and throughout the state. Thank you again, and good luck. I know you've got some challenging decisions ahead in the budget process in the next few weeks with the governor, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mayor Liccardo, and thanks to SVLG as well for all the great work they're doing in the region and across the state. Thank you, Mayor.